Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, we're plugging in with an Australian group that saw their biggest triumph emerge from their biggest tragedy. Join us as we go back in black.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Dean Legiro here. Eric Kuber, as always, in the other chair.
Hello. How are you, Dean?
I'm doing good. This is going to be an exciting episode. Before we get to it, though, of course, we have to let you know, visit us on social media. We're at 3324 Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. That's what's called a call to action. We're asking you to do something and join us there. We've got a great community of people there hanging out, posting all kinds of crazy stuff. And then if you listen to us on Spotify, it would be great if you can give us a review, rating. 5-star. How about 5-star? We'll take 5.
Why not? Yeah.
Right? Why not? We shoot for the stars, so we're going to go for 5 stars.
Doing this a year. I think we've earned it.
I think so. I don't think we've ever done less than
something. We're actually making people work.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever done less than a 7-star show. So asking for 5 is 2 less than what we provide anyway. So I think we're actually providing more than what we're asking. So 5 stars on Spotify would do the job. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us each week as we talk about the best in music and movie podcasting. Mm-hmm. True statement?
Indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Don't
much
even have to swear in a book of Bibles. That is true. It's the truth. So it's funny. When we did our Amy Winehouse episode, I believe I said not to be confused with Back in Black. Well, now we're going to say not to be confused with Back to Black.
Right.
So we've actually covered both. We did Amy Winehouse first, Back to Black, and now we're visiting AC/DC with Back in Black. So let's get the stats going, and then we'll get this going. This is a fun one.
All
so
right.
This album was released in July of 1980, produced by Mutt Lange, and we're going to need to talk just a little bit about Mutt Lange eventually. This is the second. Eventually, not right now. I don't want to go off now.
Eventually,
we'll get to him eventually. Mutt, put Mutt in his cage, and then we'll let him out later. This is the second best-selling album of all time. We're going to get to that in a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about later, but for right now, it's currently actually more than 25 times platinum.
Yeah,
with an estimated sales of 50 million worldwide. Beast and a half.
An absolute beast. Yep.
Absolute beast.
Yep.
And they were 2003 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. I mean, they better.
Yeah.
They better be. So, and then let's get to a little brief history. They were formed in 1973 by Malcolm and Angus Young, 2 brothers. Who are actually English, but then they moved to Australia. So they are an Australian band by location, but some of the pedigree of some of the members is actually English. Mm-hmm. Their first album was in 1975, High Voltage. Well, their name's AC/DC. That goes right in. They're connecting the name to the album titles. They were always clever from the beginning with their album titles. They have really rock and roll album titles, right? These are like the epitome of rock and roll. Their album titles. We could go through those. Mm-hmm. What leads us to Back in Black is the original lead singer was Bon Scott, and they were known. They weren't a giant band though, right? I mean, they were kind of known, but not something that was so great. They had Highway to Hell and Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, a couple of things, but not not anything that was so gangbusters back then with Bon Scott.
Yeah, you could say they were a little bit of a cult band in a sense, but around the time, I mean, Zeppelin was still happening. You had a lot of the bands happening in the 70s. So yeah, the Thunder from Down Under, as it were. I didn't know them honestly until this album came out. And that's, then of course I heard certain songs on the radio, and I just assumed that those songs would be on this album.
Yeah.
When I first got it, because I didn't know that this was actually their 6th or 7th album at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're
and that's actually pretty much what happened. And when this album came out and took off, people their back catalog became very popular. So before this, they were not their album before this, which was Highway to Hell, that hit number 17 on the US charts. Their studio album before that, 133. So they were not like a big name group. They were kind of there and touring and getting it done and spreading the word to the masses, but certainly not on the level of a Zeppelin or an Aerosmith or any of these, Black Sabbath, any of these bands of the 70s. They were just kind of plugging away on Australia and building building their fan base. They were kind of like
the word of mouth band. They were like, check these guys out. You knew the fans, you saw the fans, they had the t-shirts, they were, like AC/DC, and they're like, the logo. You gotta check these guys out. Yeah, you gotta, so they were
that
like
was
the
one
niche.
of those bands with the logo, right?
They were
saw the logo.
Like the new niche sort of. Would you consider them metal? They're kind of under the
that's
heavy
funny.
metal.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
If you listen, and I started going back, I certainly am not an AC/DC aficionado, but I went back for a comparison. I'm like, well, let me listen to some of the, I knew some of the Bon Scott stuff, but I said, let me listen to a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I would say that the Bon Scott era, I think probably had more in common with like an Aerosmith, dirty, grungy kind of sound, right. more of a, you could call mainstream rock. And then we'll get into Brian Johnson, but I think with Back in Black, it changed. Things changed, and I would consider what they were doing. It's certainly not rock and roll. So if it's hard rock, it's closer to metal.
Yeah,
and they have a certain niche in metal. So when you think about metal, you may think about certain bands, but they have to be. We talked about it in our Led Zeppelin episode, right? Who was the godfather? Who was the father of metal? Was it Zeppelin? Was it Deep Purple?
Yeah.
Who was the other band? And Sabbath. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to talk about them as metal in the conversation, AC/DC would absolutely be a descendant. Then they absolutely would be in the metal category at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Because of the particular sound they have.
Yeah. I think what does it for me, again, it's the groove. It's there's the certain, certain metal bands are just very sort of like, to me, that's kind of like, perhaps that's a stigma or whatever. But, for me,
that's the thing. When you think of heavy metal, you immediately think of hair bands. You think of
Metallica or something, something that ill, like, or Iron Maiden But
this is different.
AC/DC is more rock and roll. It was more like they had grooves. They had, of course, with this album, Hell's Bells, that was might have been one of the first tracks that resembled a kind of a heavy metal track where it's that resounding sound to it, and then it just builds up, and then it sort of kind of reminds you of the stuff that would come later.
Yeah, they definitely skirt the line. They absolutely kind of ride the line between hard rock. I mean, you could say then, would you consider Judas Priest heavy metal then? Right? I mean, because they're all kind of in
that same
Scorpion.
Sure,
they're kind of all in this hard rock container that also people refer to it as heavy metal.
Yeah, but there's
right?
With metal, there's different facets, just like
different
just
styles.
Just like anything else, really. If you think about it, put it under a certain umbrella, things are going to be a little bit different. Everybody's trying to develop their own sound. But
you ask any teenager from the 80s if AC/DC was metal, and absolutely. You can even ask Beavis and Butthead, because one of them wore the shirt, right? One had an AC/DC shirt, one had a Metallica shirt. So they were in the public consciousness as heavy metal.
As heavy metal.
So 1979, Highway to Hell comes out, and that would be the last album with Bon Scott. In early 1980, Bon Scott would pass away, and he would die from essentially from alcohol poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
He was found passed out in the back of a car. Friend tried to revive him and couldn't.
Yeah.
And he passed away. And at that point, AC/DC, this is one of those crossroads moments is, what do we do? I mean, he's the lead singer. Yeah. He's kind of has a distinctive voice in rock and roll too.
Right. Yep.
So it's kind of like, okay, Bon Scott was definitely more of a singer, could sing as well. So he kind of had kind of that sinister kind of voice, but also could sing. Bon Scott's parents are like, no, he would want you to continue. He would want you to go on. All right, well, now what? It turns out in one of these weird rock and roll story circumstances.
Yeah.
Bon Scott was, I don't know if they were touring or Bon Scott was in England at one point in the UK, and he saw this band Geordie, and there was a singer, Brian Johnson, and he was quite impressed with him, not thinking anything, but just had made mention to the band, hey, I saw this band, or I saw this guy, Brian Johnson, really energetic performer, this, that, and the other thing. I actually covered it on one of our quick hits as well, the story of that. Having nothing to do with anything. Bon Scott passes away. They remembered what he said. And like, we should probably try and find this guy, like, or just see what the deal is. And at this point, like, Brian Johnson's like in his 30s. And Geordie, this group Geordie from the UK, go look them up on YouTube. I mean, they didn't have any hits. They weren't really anything big. And if you look at any of the footage of Brian Johnson singing with Geordie, he's just a straight up singer. Yeah. I don't know if you got to see any of his stuff with Geordie. It's not what's on Back in Black, which is very interesting. He was a straight up, just a rock singer. So they hunt this guy down and they say, hey, do you want to come audition? He was deciding. He's like, I'm not sure. He was kind of like the rock and roll lifestyle was kind of passing him by because Geordie didn't do anything, and there was nothing on the horizon for him. So he's like, he got nothing to lose. Sure. So he went to the audition and they really clicked. And AC/DC was like, you know what? We still have to listen to all these other people audition, but they knew they wanted him. But they had to all right, we got to listen to everybody else, I guess, because we have them scheduled. But they had their band.
Yeah.
Which was really, I don't even know what to make of this album sometimes when you think about it and you think about its placement. So Brian Johnson comes in and they all they couldn't get any studios in the UK. So they end up going to the Bahamas to record. So I guess that's where you go. If you can't find a studio in the UK,
Nassau.
You can't go to France. You can't go to France. You can't go to Ireland. You can't go anywhere in Europe. You have to go all the way down to the Bahamas. Like, that's the next closest place. But you know what? They went and did that, and that's where they would record Back in Black, which would become the second biggest selling album of all time.
Crazy.
And let's roll through the list of the top selling albums of all time, and very, very interesting. And that's part of it. I think what maybe you can help me sort out too is why this album. I don't know. But anyway, the first, nothing against it. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like, this is a group that was seemingly quite obscure relative.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, they have this tragedy, decide to soldier on, get a new singer, and they release an album that absolutely just blows the door off the genre, literally.
Yeah. Perhaps maybe in the wake of tragedy, things, weird things happen. People tend to grasp onto those kinds of things. The album itself, Back in Black, the title is a tribute to Bon Scott. So it's almost very, I wouldn't say morbid, but it's just kind of like, a
little bit. The album cover is as well. They wanted
completely black, and it's a little bit.
They wanted it entirely black, and the record label's like, no, if you can outline like your logo in gray, we'll be okay with that. But otherwise, it would have been totally black in honor of Bon Scott.
Yeah, the differences in the voices to me were this. I mean, because I had never heard Geordie, so no, I didn't. I don't know. I'm not familiar with, with Brian Johnson before. Yep. Bon Scott had a very unique voice in itself. I mean, he was very sort of a gravelly type, higher range, but Brian Johnson just like I can't believe he could keep that up
Yeah, he's got like a Scotch voice.
To me, it sounds like he's got a sore throat. I mean, or at least like when you hear him sing, go through a song, you think that, oh my God, his voice must be like,
it's got to be ripped up.
And it's just, and
he's got a voice like he drinks a fifth of Scotch before every show, right? It's like that. It's like that smoker's, like drinker's voice, and it's like, how does that not?
And it's so high,
because it sounds like he's forcing it, but
it's labored. It's very labored.
Before we get to more of Brian Johnson, let's roll through the top 10 albums of all time. And there's something interesting in here as well. That's why I want to go through all 10. So the first one, obviously, Michael Jackson, Thriller.
Yeah.
Right. Number 2, AC/DC, Back in Black. Number 3, soundtrack to The Bodyguard. Number 4, Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell. Number 5, Eagles, of course, their greatest hits, which is the best-selling greatest hits compilation ever. Was that number 5? Number 6, no, that was 1, 2, 3, 4. That was number 5. Number 6 is Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Number 7, the Eagles are on here again with Hotel California. Number 8, Saturday Night Fever. We've done a lot of these episodes,
right?
we didn't use this list to choose, but the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever. Number 9, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. Number 10, Shania Twain, Come On Over. Oh. Interesting thing about number 10, also produced by Mutt Lange.
Yes, because
he was married to Shania Twain.
That's right.
And Mutt Lange became like the producer du jour for almost everybody. A lot of work. He would continue to work with AC/DC. He basically gave Def Leppard their sound.
Yeah.
With Pyromania and Hysteria, like kind of, and that's his thing. That's like he's known for that, is he took Def Leppard and kind of smoothed everything out for them and kind of gave them those harmonies that we came to know on Pyromania and going forward. He did that for AC/DC as well. Because he worked with them on their on the album before this. So that was kind of like the run up, and then we get to Back in Black and forget it. It's just that, like you were saying, there's a sound that they achieved, which sounds different from the older stuff. It's not as
it's bolder.
It's very polished. It's very clean as well.
But bolder.
Yeah.
But yeah, the songs are sort of amped up. It is exactly a, sort of an amalgam of, they were pushing it into a new wave or something. I mean, it was just sort of and it's largely due to Mutt Lange. I mean, it's a testament to what a good producer can do and what they can achieve for someone.
Yeah.
So again, that's part of the success of this record has to be.
Because he was a taskmaster. He would push about Bon Scott to his limits as well, and Brian Johnson with vocal technique and singing songs all the way through and not like punching in and out, because he goes, you guys gotta have to sing this. Yeah. So you got to get it right, and you have to learn how to breathe. And Brian Johnson's like, what is this guy talking about? And then when everything was said and done, they understood like what it was. He was such a perfectionist, and he would start doing backing vocals, and his voice, Mutt Lange's voice, was so prominent that he would have to stand further back from the microphone during the sessions from the other members, just so his voice didn't overpower and it had the right blend. Yeah. So he knew what he was talking about. And then he was showing Angus Young, just some nuances about soloing. Not that Angus Young needed any help.
No, everybody. I mean, they all want to do their own thing, and it's hard because sometimes they just like, the effing producer, man, they're not going to tell me how to play. Yep. They're not going to do our, but sometimes you need it. Sometimes you have to play the game, as it were, to really achieve something. But that's the thing. I mean, you really need a good producer, and a producer has to have that musical background, because they got producers that don't play anything or don't do anything, and they think they know what they're talking about, like, whatever. And that's happened quite a few times. But with this, it's like, knowing exactly what they have their finger on the pulse of something.
Yeah, it was less of an opinion, his producer role, and more of a mentor.
Right.
Yeah, it was less like, here's my opinion. He's like, no, we're going to do it this way, or you need to learn how to breathe when you're singing, because this is going to, and you may not like it or like what I'm saying, but this is what needs to happen. The producer is important in this thing because, if you don't have a singular focus, I'm not sure whether or not AC/DC did or not, but if you lack that, The producer is the one that's also able to kind of hone all that in for the group. You know, unless you're a group that really knows what you want, knows exactly what you're going for, but they were without a lead singer. They just had a new guy coming in. So you could almost say somewhat directionless, kind of, okay, we've got a new guy. We don't know what the future is going to bring.
Yeah.
Get Mutt Lange again. And he just really, like you said, from the opening bells of Hell's Bells, which is interesting because they wanted a specific type of bell to be made for that track. And they're like, we can't, the foundry, we can't get a bell made. So then they were like down in Bahamas, and they were trying like different bells there, and it wasn't working. And by the time they figured out it wouldn't work, they got back and said, the foundry was able to make a bell. So they actually had a bell made and it was ready. And then they were able to use that bell and its whole, and you say the album cover somber, and the way the album opens is somber. It's almost like a funeral bell,
it is. Yeah. And that was on purpose.
Something is it's tolling, and it's calling you to this album.
I got chills the first time I heard that song, and it was essential listening, hanging out 1980, the Ridge Road crew, as I spoke of. This was one of the albums that was kind of floating around, and it's one of the finest hard rock albums ever made. And there's just no doubt about it. I mean, for someone who's not a huge heavy metal fan like myself, there is something about it that just, gets you, and it moves, and the songs move, and they're, like I said,
no ballads.
Right. There's groove. They're hard pumping. They're, and then of course, Marvel when Iron Man came out, like they took AC/DC, they renewed. I didn't get back. Funnily enough, though, I didn't get back into the album because of Iron Man. Like I didn't start listening to their stuff again because of Iron, because this was one of those albums you put on the shelf for a long time, and then you take it off and dust it off, and it's a great listen.
Yeah, and just Brian Johnson's vocal on that opening track, and it's funny, the opening lyrics in Hell's Bells are actually about when they got to the Bahamas. There was so many storms and all this stuff going on that those are the lyrics. The rolling thunder, drive, all that stuff is them describing the storms that were in Bahamas.
Right.
I'm coming on like a hurricane, white lightning's flashing across the sky. But the way Brian Johnson delivers those lyrics, like you said, there's something. There's no other voice like him. Because I think if anybody else tried to sing like him, they would damage their vocal cords. I don't know what it is. It's almost like the Barry Gibb effect, where Barry Gibb discovered he could sing falsetto, and then that kind of changed the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
You get Brian Johnson in AC/DC, and he's like Bon Scott, but like on steroids, or amplified. Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
It's got that grittiness.
Yeah.
But I think we just hit it on the head. That is exactly right.
Because he's not a copy, but he sounds like, if you listen to like Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, you can be like, well, it could be Brian, you can hear the similarities in a lot of those things.
And obviously singing the older catalog was not a big deal for Brian Johnson to go back.
I think he probably updated it too. Brought something different to it. So go figure, and again, it was just kind of and I think maybe why you like it is maybe the reason why I like it as well, because of that production. It's so clean. It's not muddy, even though it's riff heavy. I mean, this is like rock and roll riff heaven with Angus Young. I mean, that's what you're getting with AC/DC. Is their stock and trade is riffs and big sound. They're not ballads.
No,
they're not doing any ballads and slow numbers and love songs like that. They are there to blow your ears out, and they're good at it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. It's like, with AC/DC, you know what you're going to get. And in the case of AC/DC, that's not a bad thing, because they deliver it so consistently, and they never tried to change. We're going to get grungy, and we're going to embrace this. We're going to go electronic. AC/DC has had one stated goal, and they stayed on one road. Yeah. And you can't fault them for that, because Thunderstruck would come out. I think the only AC/DC CD I bought was Who Made Who, which was from it was kind of like the loose soundtrack for the movie Maximum Overdrive.
That's right.
But it was kind of, it was like a greatest hits though. Yeah. So it was it had Bon Scott stuff on it. It had Brian Johnson stuff, and then it had a couple of new songs. which is a great introduction for me. I was like, so I got Highway to Hell, and I got like Ride On from Bon Scott, and then I got all the stuff that you knew, like You Shook
It's
Me All
ironic,
Night
isn't
Long.
it? It's like they were the go-to band for the, for cinema. There's so many of their songs appeared in movies, and like I said, songs that move, songs that just drive, and that there's that pumping. You couldn't put you can't put something like Iron Maiden in a movie. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't have the same effect. Especially if it's like an action type of piece where there's a rhythm to everything going on screen. You got, matching that with like Iron Man would Shoot the Thrill.
Yeah.
When he's flying around and like, right. In Iron Man 2, he comes down and he, that was such a great moment, and again, that whole soundtrack, right? Not the score, but the soundtrack was made up of AC/DC songs, even though there were several other groups on that soundtrack. But
it's just amazing. And I think they took a little bit of the Zeppelin DNA with those riffs and those kind of chunky. They were kind of like the next evolution of what Zeppelin was doing, because Zeppelin kind of started moving as Zeppelin progressed. They moved away from that, that Zeppelin 2 and that immigrant song type stuff.
They started getting a little bit more,
kind
trying new things. Yeah, with Zeppelin, they were experimenting with, doing ballads, and they were like, even Little Prague, and they were, like folk, even stuff like that. So,
and AC/DC was like, nope, it's going to be rock. It's going to be metal. It's going to be songs about having a good time.
That's right.
Songs about drinking. Songs about women. Songs about having sex. I mean, this is what it is. This is AC/DC.
Plenty of that.
This is what AC/DC is about, and they are not ashamed of it, and they celebrate it, and they are made for arena rock. And if you look at any of the concert footage, they play massive. They don't play arenas. They play like venues, or they play fields. I mean, the people that go to these concerts and the amount of people, if you look at anything on YouTube, is absolutely amazing. So they're so
you're going to have a good time. You're going to go to that concert, and you're going to come away feeling something. And it's not like the kind of thing where it's angry. It's good time rock and roll. It's like, it's like, they're
not looking to change the world.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not political.
They're not making a statement. They're just,
there's no
out there.
I don't know. I mean, there might have been a mosh pit or something, but I don't see this being that kind of music that would drive you to want to hit somebody. You just want to have a good time, and
how could you when the lead guitarist is dressed like a schoolboy?
That's right,
wearing the hat and wearing the shorts. I mean, the coat, and it didn't like a good fit right. I mean, and that's maybe why some people don't take them seriously, because you see something like that, you think this has got to be a gimmick. This guy's like, I mean, he started from the beginning, but even now when they play or when they have played, it's become so iconic. But it's also easy to dismiss that and say, oh well, this is AC/DC, it's metal, and look at this guy dressed like this, and don't take it for granted, because Angus Young is a formidable songwriter and is a formidable guitar player. Absolutely. It's easy to dismiss AC/DC because they're so riff heavy that it's pretty basic. And when you're a beginning guitar player, like Back in Black is the first riff you learn. Like that's the first thing you learn. It's like Guitar 101. So it's very easy to bring them down to that level and say, oh yeah, it's kind of basic stuff, but not really. When you see him solo and play, and then his brother Malcolm in the back, these guys are short. First of all, I'm sorry. Malcolm Young is 5'2". Okay.
Yeah.
And he plays a Gretsch. He plays this Gretsch hollow body guitar, it's gigantic.
Yeah.
I'll find one of the videos. It may even be the video for Back in Black, and he's playing this gigantic guitar. It looks like a kid playing a guitar, because these dudes are so short. And the guitar that Malcolm Young plays, not Angus, but Malcolm plays this giant hollow body SG, white Gretsch.
Yeah.
And Angus plays the Gibson. He plays like the SG or whatever it is. But these guys just know what they're doing. So let me go back to this question: is why this album? Why is this album the second biggest selling album of all time? Why not something by Led Zeppelin? Why not something by the Beatles? Why not something by why not the Who? Nothing against AC/DC, but there are so many other groups and albums that have been so much more impactful. And this Australian group, seemingly, again, out of nowhere, their previous albums didn't do anything.
Perhaps it had something to do with the 80s coming in, and when things were changing so dramatically, that there was still at least a solid rock and roll band that you can depend on.
You think so? So you think there was like since it was a drought of?
I think so. Like Zeppelin was done at this point. They were pretty much, it was 1980, and that was their like coda. I think was just an album of songs of leftovers,
like outtakes
really.
And stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The Who, they weren't the same band that they were.
You bet they weren't. Oh, how do you like that?
Front. Not that it was horrible, but it was
changing. They were changing.
Right, exactly.
Aerosmith was relatively dormant as well. Yeah. The Stones kind of had Tattoo You, but
Stones were more blues based, and they were sort of more R&B, and so they were a different type of thing. But they were also experimenting with disco and doing that kind of thing and changing. But AC/DC, no, I mean they're just a solid.
So you think they were kind of like you think they were like last band standing, and they became like the standard bearers of
purity. There was a purity to them.
Uh-huh.
I think absolute purity to the band, and they didn't waver. They just kept it going, even when that kind of thing was not as popular in the mid '80s. You're talking about world music coming in, and you had all these bands from all around the world, and people were more political.
And Thunderstruck,
exactly. And it's like. And then of course, you had Guns N' Roses. They came in and they were kind of maybe a sort of a nod to AC/DC. Maybe they were the next step or so. I don't know.
It's funny you should mention that, because Brian Johnson wasn't able to tour for a while because he was having some issues.
Yeah.
And who took over lead vocal duties for AC/DC was Axl Rose, who was probably the only guy that could come close enough. He had that
True.
That upper range growl in his voice. I don't know how he could sustain it, but he took over. I don't forget how many tours it was, but
yeah,
he took over for Brian Johnson while he was recovering, and AC/DC just kept going on. And it's like, here we go. Axl Rose is going to step in and played with AC/DC and covered the tour for him.
Okay, so when you think of 1980 alone, just think about some of the albums that came out that year. I don't think there was anything as hard rocking as Back in Black. If I could be mistaken, but again, there was the new wave thing was coming in, and it was things were already changing so drastically, and didn't really notice it at the time. Punk rock was pretty much done as well. That was kind of on the decline. That hardcore punk, and now it's changing to more keyboards and like these poppy synth things. And I can't really think of anything else that came out that year that was just straight up pure.
I mean, Ozzy, whatever Ozzy had at the time. I don't know if Diary of a Madman. I don't know if that came out in '80.
Yeah, but even Ozzy, I mean, he would, he was doing ballads, and he was, you know what I mean? Like there was that kind of that sort of saccharine kind of stuff that started coming in, and I'm not a fan. I was never a fan of the hair metal bands of the period, and even something like Def Leppard, like the sound, you mentioned the sound with Def Leppard. To me, that was that very compressed, very slick.
Yeah, Mutt Lange would make them very slick. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Blizzard of Oz from Ozzy Osbourne came out in 1980, and that had Crazy Train on it. Okay. So I'm going to say why AC/DC then? That's the thing. I don't get. I have nothing against this group. I just don't understand. In the top 10, you've got the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and stuff you would expect to see there. Yeah. And then AC/DC at number 2 behind Michael Jackson. Yeah. A moment, and again, it's not like this was chock full of number ones. It had great songs on it. I mean, the hits are Hell's Bells, Back in Black, and You Shook Me All Night Long. Those are certified absolutely hard rock classics. This album didn't go to number 1. It hit number 4 in the United States. And these were not like number 1 songs.
But I don't think that still had that perhaps it still had enough of that fan base where, now we have a popular album, but it's still AC/DC. It's still the AC/DC we love. They didn't really change they changed, but the songs are just bolder.
Yeah,
if anything, they're more hard rocking. They just got better. And there's no filler on this album, in my opinion. It's one of the one of the most solid rock albums, I think. And again, I think it's just the purity aspect of it. of the band itself, the integrity that they never really sold out. They never really did, try to do like, oh, because the record company wants us to do that.
Yeah.
They just, no, they never really went there.
Yeah.
But
And
other bands did. Even Metallica, like at some point they recorded stuff that that as a Metallica fans will tell you that there was quite embarrassing in their opinion.
Some head scratchers.
Yeah. Like what was that? But
the interesting thing about it is before Brian Johnson, the core writing trio was Bon Scott, Angus Young, and Malcolm Young. So Bon Scott passes away. Brian Johnson starts writing songs. You would think that the direction would change a little bit, or you're bringing in another lyricist and another kind of perspective. And maybe that's what it was too. Maybe his perspective was that harder edge, and because of what he could do vocally, they were able to really go for it with that scratchy voice that he has, and it sounds like he's shouting, but he's really not. He's singing. I don't know how he does it, but it sounds like
phrasing.
He's shouting. Yeah,
the phrasing
if you listen
on
to
this
Back in Black, Back in Black, almost is like a rap. It's almost like a rap song.
Exactly. I was just about to say
very much has like a hip hop flow to it, of the way the way he spits. He spit. I'm going to go with the term they use now. He spits fire.
Yeah.
On this, like he just wrote those lyrics are just popping out of him in Back in Black.
Mm-hmm.
Quick short rhyming lyrics, and he gets on to the next phrase, and then you've got this guitar behind it, just dun 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 dun, like it does. That riff just it just keeps recycling, and it's almost like he's rapping over it.
Yeah, but you get to that second verse, and then there's more lyrics on top of it, and he's like trying to be, but he manages to get him out there and squeeze them in so that it fits the rhythm.
Yeah, he gets it. He goes quick.
Yeah,
but when you listen, I love listening to the lyrics of it though, because it's such a great, like when you listen, to it, and then I'm listening, I'm like, this sounds almost like a rap song. I was like, I was kind of like, wow, I never really, because you're just so usually overtaken by the riff, because the riffs are everything. You shook me all night long. It's like you're hearing an AC/DC song, but with Back in Black, when I gave it the in-depth listen, and I'm like, wow. Kind of has some rap DNA, or maybe rap took some DNA from them.
Could be.
Of course, those kind of riffs are tailor made for sampling too in rap music.
It's been done. I'm sure. So.
Beastie Boys were sampling Zeppelin high and low. I mean, they were sampling everything. When
Beastie Boys were
out,
sampling Those Shoes by the Eagles. I mean, that dun,
they sampled down. They sampled
all kinds of stuff.
The Beastie Boys. They sampled Down on the Corner and for License to Ill. So they were taking everything. They took everything and just threw it against the wall. So I wouldn't be surprised that AC/DC likewise. But that Back in Black just has a lot of that feel to it. The way the lyrics just or the way the delivery is.
Right. If you asked a die-hard hardcore AC/DC fan, they'll probably tell you, "Oh yeah, Back in Black. It's the popular one." So. But I prefer, something else. You know what I mean? Like there'll be that one album that they prefer over Back in Black. But for me, it wants you to go back and listen to their catalog. So I love this, and let me check some of this other stuff out. And it's ironic because I don't like the older stuff as much as Back in Black. To me, it's the perfect. It's one of those albums.
Well, it's different. They're almost like two bands. They're almost like two bands, but they didn't radically change. It's not like the David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar thing where you changed the vocalist and the direction of the band literally changed. Here they changed the vocalist. They didn't particularly change per se, but what they did is they got even better because they were an okay band before, and then Back in Black comes out and it's just like all of a sudden people were AC like crazy for them.
I keep bringing up Metallica. But do you think they did the same thing with their Black album? Were they trying? You think they were trying to sort of subconsciously trying to emulate what AC/DC did with Back in Black?
I don't know. I think
because that album was more. That was their supposedly their big one as well. Like their big, more commercial. Success, album,
but they were on an upward trajectory, right? Metallica was kind of growing with And Justice for All, and they were kind of gaining popularity. Again, AC/DC was kind of wallowing in like not even cracking the top 100, 2 albums before this.
Right.
And just kind of very workmanlike music. not build, kind of building towards stuff, I suppose, but not in the way that Metallica did it. Metallica also had the benefit of MTV and exposure. So
That's
things
right.
were a little bit different. And then when that Black album came out and Enter Sandman, and just people were just like losing their minds, everybody had that. And this is kind of the same thing, but however many years before, without the extra exposure you got from MTV, it was kind of, they were doing it the old way, just kind of getting out there, and people were just picking up this album and it was just kind of steamrolling, almost like they were a new band, almost like this like new band was discovered. Because then all of a sudden people were going back, and even the label kind of re-released their albums, and those old albums started entering the charts. And I think they had like 5 albums in the charts at once, which was like a record that hadn't been, I don't know, set since like the Beatles or something.
Yeah.
Because this album was so big and so expansive in its reach that all this old stuff, everyone's like, oh my God, they have all this other stuff too? Like, oh, okay, let's go check it out. And then they became like this cottage industry. So they had an instant back catalog that not a lot of people were aware of. Except for like those hard, I'm not dismissing the hard rock fans or the hardcore AC/DC fans, but for the most part, all of a sudden this album comes out, and then there's all this other stuff we can go listen to. And then propelling them forward was just, it was incredible. And it's odd because one of my favorite bands is The Cult.
Yeah.
And when I first heard the song Love Removal Machine, I thought it was AC/DC. Because it's got that, it had the same exact riff. I'm like, is this an AC/DC song? And I was like, because it was so influenced by it. You can absolutely hear it when you listen to Love Removal Machine. I'm like, this is AC/DC. It's got to be. I was like, no, it's this other band called The Cult. That took that same aesthetic. They took a lot from AC/DC when they revamped their sound. They absolutely kind of they kind of mashed the Doors and AC/DC together. And it was like the new sound of The Cult. So they do have influence. They absolutely have influenced other bands as well.
Okay, I'm just going to read. There's a few critiques of the album.
Okay.
Tim Jones of The Guardian says that it was hailed as a high watermark for heavy metal music. NME regarded it as an important release in the 1980s, metal and heavy rock, naming it one of the 20 best metal albums of its decade, while the Daily Telegraph ranked it as one of the 20 greatest heavy metal albums of all time. According to rock journalist Joe Harrington, Back in Black was released at a time when heavy metal stood at a turning point between a decline and a revival, as most bands in the genre were playing slower tempos and longer guitar solos.
You hit that before. You hit it right on the head, where there was a drought of quality metal, right? If you're going for the power ballads and you're going for that slow stuff, AC/DC they don't deal in that.
Nope.
Straight up, and if you look at some of those, the actual critiques, they will always get critiqued with like lyrical content. It's like, oh, okay, it's basic, it's rock and roll lifestyle, it's drinking, it's women, it's drugs, but that's what this is. I mean, that's what this music is. They're not looking to change the world. They're not looking to make a political statement. Like you said, it's good time music. It's about drinking, and what are the songs? Have a drink on me, shake a leg, give the dog a bone. I mean, they're not, you don't have to really figure out what they're talking about when they're not hiding the lyrics. They're not burying it in some other stuff and other meanings. It's
pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah. I want to put my love into you.
What do you think that means? That doesn't mean that.
I don't know.
That's got to mean like putting a letter in an envelope and mailing it or something. It has to be that. It can't mean, it's got to be a metaphor,
right?
No, it's not. It means,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
But I guess I was wrong. Maybe I need to re-listen to this album because I was listening to it from a different point of view.
we can't get all esoteric with this one. There's no. I don't. I don't
can't. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the great thing is there's these times when you just want this stuff, and it was such a joy to kind of listen to this and know that like Back in Black was cut, that it wasn't the opening cut.
Yeah.
It was kind of like Hell's Bells opens and it's so somber and you don't know what's coming. And the song, that song just kind of opens the album in such a big way. But then you get these, you get Shoot to Thrill and these other ones. And then on side 2, you get Back in Black, and it's like, what? Like, okay, there's more. And then you get like probably their most popular song was You Shook Me All Night Long. I mean, that's the most probably radio friendly. You'll probably hear that on like even on oldies radio, I think.
Yeah, but boy.
It's one of the most like radio friendly songs. And that's even not that friendly. It's
yeah,
what
but
that's about. It's not about making a milkshake, I'll tell you that much.
No, it's not. But yeah, I mean, we cranked that. I think we played that song over and over. It's one of the great radio hits. I mean, radio songs of a hard rock group. You know that you could again depend on. You always heard it. It was in the air. It was always playing. So
you go into a bar and you hear like You Shook Me All Night Long. You know you're in the right kind of bar. Like
it's either that or there's a passing car and you could hear it like coming from one end of the street to the other.
In
like
the summer.
You shook me all night long. And it just keeps going, right?
Yep. So, then you know you're in the right town as well. They have absolutely AC/DC has stood the test of time. And if you're not a metal person, that's okay. This is an enjoyable listen, I think, and it might pique your interest. And it certainly won't convert you to like, I'm going to become a metalhead or anything. No. Because like you said, this does skirt the hard rock thing. Yeah. And Eric has stated thing that metal isn't really his thing. So I think this is a good, and how could you doubt it? It's the second biggest selling album of all time. Mm-hmm. So I think from a curiosity standpoint, I think it will make an interesting listen. If you're going to, as an experiment, listen to the top 10 selling albums of all time, well, this is on your list as well. And it's the only one. It's very unique because the Eagles are on there twice. Fleetwood Mac is on there. So those are all kind of in the same genre. Let's be honest. There's kind of you can kind of start to pick out a pattern there. AC/DC stands alone in that list. There's no other, like I said, no Zeppelin, no other hard rock like that. It's Shania Twain and Michael Jackson.
The most baffling
The Bodyguard.
Bodyguard?
Yeah.
Number 3, really?
Number 3, of course, we know that. I mean, it was we've talked about this on other episodes. It did it on the back of I Will Always Love You.
Yeah,
absolutely. Wow. But there's nothing wrong with that. But when you look at this list, it's like, Saturday Night Fever, Eagles.
Yeah. Well, that was a beast.
And then AC/DC is their number 2. It's like, it's almost like, who let these guys in? Right? Who let them into our top 10 is kind of like the thing. It's like they're in here, Brian Johnson.
Derelicts.
Brian Johnson with his cap pulled down all the way over his eyes, and these guys kind of come in and like kick the door down on the top 10 and they're like, we're here. Right? I mean, that's kind of what this is with AC/DC, because they just have that attitude and you want to root for these guys. There's never been any like big controversies, no crazy stuff.
Jack Black's a fan. We know that, right? School of Rock. I mean, come on. I mean, the influence of him alone.
Like I said, Beavis and Butthead. I mean, they were on the shirts there. And 2003, they get their due. They get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
One of the Young brothers, Malcolm Young, starts to having memory problems, start having some issues. Turns out he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Needed to leave the band, obviously, as a result of that. Passed away a few years ago. So that was a big loss. Malcolm Young is the rhythm guitarist, but he was really kind of known as the de facto leader. Even though Angus was the guy in the front with the schoolboy outfit and the wild moves, he does a weird duck walk. He looks like a man. You want to see someone look like a man possessed when they play the guitar. Watch Angus Young. He really, he is the guitarist
to that Chuck Berry thing, that Chuck Berry, famous Chuck Berry waddle or the walk.
He is to guitarist what Mick Fleetwood is to drummers. Like when they look like they're out of control and making faces and can't help themselves, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what Angus Young is. He looks like a man possessed, but he is totally in control of his instrument and just laying the riffs down. So this is the one.
Yep.
This is absolutely the one that
most definitely
that we're going to recommend to.
This is front stoop listening. This is in the car listening. This is I mean, to this day, it holds up. I think.
Yeah, and like I said in the open, out of a career, a band killing tragedy, it could have ended the band had they decided, because they were going to.
Yeah.
This triumph happens, so that's got to be bittersweet as well for them. It's like, okay, we're not sure what we're going to do. We lost our leader. We lost our lead singer. Should we go on? And they get this guy, and then this magical thing happens that is really, it can't be explained. So Good on AC/DC. They're certainly welcome in the top 10. You know, the Eagles might not feel too good about it with their Hotel California and Greatest Hits, and Lindsey Buckingham might be giving them the side eye with rumors. But you know, AC/DC is number 2, and we've had nothing but fun celebrating it. Absolutely check this album out. It's definitely worth a listen. If you're ready for some fist pumping, or when the weather gets warmer, or you're at a picnic, throw it on. Go ahead and make some ears bleed. Absolutely, we encourage you to do that because it's just such a great album. So,
indeed,
that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got new episodes that come out every Thursday, believe it or not. And I don't know when you're listening to this, but it did come out on a Thursday, so it was there waiting for you. So check us out there. Also join us on social media, Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast, if you will. Also on Twitter at 3324p. So for Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Cooper. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.